being in the Wembley Tunnel interviewing Phil Neville live for talksport after England playing Germany.
That's crazy. Yeah. That's amazing.
Great. Again, I'm in the Wembley Tunnel talking to the England national manager.
Welcome back to another episode of the Legendz Podcast. Today I'm chatting with a badass sports broadcaster, host and producer. BBC Sports, Wimbledon, talksport, Premier League, 5 Live Sport, and Arsenal Nation are just some of the platforms you can catch her on. She's won a Football Blacklist award. She's growing her own female and black-owned media company. It's safe to say she's a legend. Welcome, Anne-Marie Batson.
I love badass. That has just lifted me no end. I love that introduction.
Well,
That's
are.
Brilliant. Oh, I love that. Thank you. I was trying to rack my brain about the last time I saw you when you were in the UK, and I think it was at Wimbledon, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
I was with Mia.
Yeah.
She was in a previous episode. She introduced us. We just randomly. You were coming down the steps, I think,
right.
And then we just bumped into each other, and I was in a frenzy because I was rushing to go see my mate's match, but I think we were going to get some strawberries and cream in the meantime right before, so and I think it was one of the hottest days in London, which doesn't really happen, so it was an interesting one.
And when crowds were allowed at SW19, because of course there was no tournament this year. Goodness, anyway, I'm sure we'll talk about that in a bit, but thank you for having me. Thanks for asking me to join your amazing podcast.
Yeah, we had a few nice conversations at Wimbledon, and I remember you and Mia especially talking about diversity and what you guys are doing, and I was in awe, and I thought, I have to speak to this lady, this badass.
Love it.
But I guess we can track back to the beginning. What inspired you, and how did you get into sports broadcasting?
London 2012 inspired me. It was at a time when I felt the country was really, really together. All the nations were really, really together. And I was actually working on the railway at the time.
Really?
Yeah, I know. When I say that to people, that's the exact reaction that I get, because it's like, you worked on the railway? Yes. Yeah, I did. I actually studied media through school, through college, through university, and then went to work in TV production for a few years. Fell out of love with that. Then I set up my own little company providing courses for young people who were struggling with literacy skills and relationship skills, professional relationship skills with adults. And I'd use my TV production skills as part of that. And I was doing that for a couple of years, and suddenly the adult in me said, you know what, Anne-Marie, you want to buy a house, you want to get a decent car, you want to put some money into some savings, the sensible head started to pop up a bit. So I decided to join the 9-to-5 corporate world, and I got a job working for the railway, for the main infrastructure company that looks after all the tracks, the signals, some stations, and I worked in the communications department. Told myself I'd be there for a couple of years. 8 years later, I was still there, and I worked in different departments, mainly in the communications department, but I moved around. So I worked in stakeholder management. I worked in community relations. I also worked on the press desk, which was a real eye-opener. And it was on that press desk where the itch started to get bigger and bigger, because I'd been thinking for some time that I'd wanted to go back and work for myself. And I didn't know how to go about that and what I was going to do. And sport, I love sport. I'd grown up in a football-rich family. I did a lot of sports at school. I played netball. I ran the 100 meters. I represented my school in the 100 meters and just loved sport. But, just always thought, well, I'm not a journalist. I learned about journalism when I was at university and college, but I didn't think it was the career for me. But that itch just kept getting stronger and stronger. The thought of working for myself, working with other journalists. So I would start to chat with journalists and talk about their journey. And a lot of them tried to put me off, not because of my gender or my skin color, more about how the industry was shrinking. It was the time of the recession. The recession was just having a massive, massive impact. But they said that you definitely got the skills, but there's not a lot of jobs. And then London 2012 came around, and the togetherness of the country and everyone loving sport and celebrating all that emotion, I desperately wanted to be a part of that. And I was still working the railway at the time, and I was working shifts, And I was working down in South London for TfL. I was seconded down to TfL, which is Transport for London. And you'd see all the cameras that are around London, and you'd see all the crowds going all to the various events, like over to Stratford, to South East London to watch the equestrian trials, over to Wimbledon to watch the tennis. And I just thought, you know what, I want to be a part of this. Whatever happens, I want to be a part of this. And that after the Olympic Games, I thought, right, that's it. I'm going to do this now. And so from then to today, it has been a journey of networking, work experience, working for free, more work experience, more building my network and connections, doing lots of online courses as well, starting to build up a portfolio, started to get paid shifts, and then started to be able to approach people with my portfolio and with my experience and say, is there an opportunity that you and I can work together?
Yeah, it's crazy how networking is actually a very important factor in all of, well, I guess in every industry, but especially in sports. It's crazy just who you know can, like a one little link can create something. Well, even just look at us. I mean, I met you through Mia, and then there you go. We're doing this podcast.
Exactly. And for me, it was a case of, I have a lovely family member who worked in the football industry. He's well renowned. He and I had that conversation right at the beginning of, I was really clear that I didn't want a leg up. I didn't want him to help me in that way of getting me a job. And he said, well, okay, well, what I'll do for you, I'll give you 2 names of people for you to go and have a chat with, because that's all I wanted to do. I wasn't asking for a job. I wanted to learn about the industry. I wanted to learn about the pros and the cons, look at the trends, what was popular to talk about. Well, football, of course, is the most important sport. It's the national sport in the UK for England. And my uncle gave me these 2 names, and I went and had coffees with these 2 gentlemen who were really, really helpful, because I asked about all kinds of jobs. I asked about being a press officer. I asked about being a producer. I asked about being an agent. I looked at becoming an agent at one point, but it was the broadcast journalism that kept coming back to me. And from then on, I knew that I had to invest in my network, because the one thing I noticed that when I'd go and speak to people, they'd like look at my CV and go, well, you've worked on the railway for nearly 8, 9, 10 years. What do you know about sport? And I'd look at job applications, and the job applications would say, must have a sporting background, must have sports experience. I'm thinking, I've worked in PR for goodness knows how long, and they're transferable skills. And it was actually getting over that hurdle of convincing people that I could talk about sport, that I had the skills of sport, but I also had a good network as well. And I think investing that time in building my network has paid off dividends for today.
Yeah, crazy. So what would you say was kind of like that point where you kind of felt like you got a little bit of a break, where you were certain that's exactly what you want to do?
I think the break that I got was an amazing opportunity to report on women's football. I was approached by the wonderful Shelley Alexander, who I will love forever. And she's big in the BBC, really encouraging and passionate about increasing diversity. She's the diversity lead for BBC Sport. We'd seen each other at mutual events anyway. We'd always end up chatting about life in the universe. And then just one day she just said to me, well, you know, do you fancy coming on the radio? I think you've got a really good voice. I like your personality. Would you fancy it? And I kind of looked at her dumbfounded, and I went, yeah, I'd love to. And it was that opportunity. A few times I'd go down and watch somebody do it first, and I'd see how they'd interact with the crowd and look how they do the introductions on the radio. The minute that mic got into my hand the first time, I felt like I was at home. It just felt so natural to me. And that's when I knew from then on, because I started to actually do newspaper journalism first. I was writing match reports, for the Voice newspaper, which was a really good break for me. I got the opportunity to go to the French Open, Roland Garros, cover it for the Voice newspaper, and I'd go to football matches and do match reports that way. As much as I liked newspaper journalism, there was something that made me think, actually, I love doing broadcast journalism. So when that opportunity presented itself and I had to cover my first women's Super League match live on air, it just felt I was at home. And that's when that was my big break, I would say, because finally I could show what I was absolutely capable of, and that showed in my work and how happy I was, how enthusiastic that I was to be there. So both to Rodney Hines at The Voice and also to Shelley Alexander. They were the two who saw something in me and wanted to develop that. So I'd always be grateful to them.
You cover a lot of sports and you're very knowledgeable in all of them. So,
thank you.
Yeah, what would you say is your favorite and what's kind of the difference?
Nora, that's a really good question. It's also a really hard question because if I say one over the other, I feel like I'm betraying them all.
Yeah, because you got your football-rich family, and then I can tell you love tennis, and then all the other sports as well on the side.
Yeah, so I love doing the Olympics is a dream. I'd love to do the Olympics, and the opportunity to do some work for British rowing was absolutely amazing. And again, just really surprised and amazed that they approached me to do some work for them, which was just brilliant. And we're going to continue the relationship, which is great. In fact, I'm going to be doing some stuff with them over Christmas, which I'm really looking forward to. Nice. Tennis is, I had those memories of rushing home from primary school, switching on BBC Two to watch Wimbledon and filling in the sheet that you used to get in the newspaper about the order of play. You get the order of play and then you get the flow chart, and I'd fill that in, and always want the opportunity to work at Wimbledon, and then lo and behold, it happened. So yeah, tennis is a big love of mine. Football, of course, because I come from a football rich family. Yeah. F1, I'm a fan of F1. I've always got something to say about F1 for sure. If anything, the question is for me, which is the sports that you don't like? Cricket. Sorry. Yeah. I know people love cricket in England and Wales.
Yeah, when I was living there, so many of my friends tried to explain it to me, and I'm like, I somewhat understand it, but I'm like, how can you, like, a match can last 5 days or something?
Yes. Yeah, test cricket.
I don't get that. Although then again, I can watch basketball for 5 days straight, so I don't know, or football too. So
yeah, basketball's a funny one. Basketball, I can kind of take it or leave it, but cricket and coming from a Caribbean background, that's sacrilege if the fact that I don't like cricket. T20 I try to get on with, but I just couldn't. And a lot of love for my friends who do love cricket. It's totally understandable, but it's not my cup of tea. Rugby's not my cup of tea either. So they're the two that I don't really engage with. But golf, I occasionally watch. I like that more as a fan rather than reporting on it. So yeah, to ask me that question about out between a football and cricket, a lot of people say to me, we love your tennis tweets is just really, really funny and sarcastic, because I want to show that other side of tennis. Just like with footballers, you have that one side of, it's brilliant talking about that, the match report and what have you, but there's also stuff that you can be quite funny about with football, and social media is giving it that side as well. So, and that's what I want to show for tennis, because I think tennis has a reputation for being seen as a posh sport, and they have worked hard to, and continue to work hard to try and change that.
Yeah, definitely. I think they're undervalued and just underrated in general. I don't think there's enough tennis. I know I have a lot of friends who play professional tennis, and it's just it's a shame how much people don't know about the sport and just what goes into it behind the scenes. Like, on a previous episode I've spoken about, unless you're in like the top 10, you have to basically take out 2 mortgages to even finance your career, to just try and get there. And just unless you're winning matches, you're not making any money. So it's a crazy sport, and there's I have so much respect for all tennis players.
Yeah, very, very much so. And you're right. I think tennis has been seen for a long time in this country that, when Wimbledon comes around and it's on the TV and on radio, now online, this country gets very much interested in it. But I've seen over the last few years, people are starting to watch other Grand Slams, but also the matches outside the Grand Slams. Because of this year and the coronavirus pandemic, there's been a lot of tennis played. And people get more interested in the Masters. So, for example, on the men's side, I know the women's calendar has just been absolutely decimated because of coronavirus, but you're starting to see now more eyes on the game. And I think that's really down to social media and the availability of information that you can now get about other tournaments that are taking place. But you are absolutely right. There is a lot of focus on the top 10, the top 20. If you're outside the top 50, the daily struggle of having to go from tournament to tournament, arranging your travel, having a small team, if you can just have one coach.
Well, some of them don't even have coaches just because they can't afford it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, during the summer, I did some interviews with British players who are within the top 100. Yeah, 200. And they would, the stories of before the pandemic hit, literally coming off the court and being told this tournament's now been cancelled. So they've won their match, thinking they're going into the next round, and then getting told by the court supervisor, actually, this tournament's now off because of the coronavirus pandemic. You'll need to get a flight back to the UK as quickly as you can. And by the way, we don't know if there's any more tournaments for the rest of the year. And you forget that tennis players are self-employed. If they don't play, they don't get paid. They're not under contract unless you've got a big sponsor who can, obviously finance certain things. But for some players, they don't even have that. So I think that's really shed a light, actually, over the last few months, how the disparity between the top 10 and their earnings, and they've earned those earnings, I should say, compared to somebody who's in the top 200, 300.
I want to see more doubles on the screen too, because I think they're super underrated. Like once you watch it, if you watch a good doubles match, I think it's way more interesting than a singles match, because the tactics are very different, and it's just it's a faster paced game. I don't know. Yeah,
no, I agree. There should be a lot more eyes on doubles, and I think that's been recognised as well, very much so. And I think people like it again when it was, at Wimbledon, when you saw Andy Murray play with Serena Williams.
Yeah.
The fact they were so having so much fun, and they were laughing and get really competitive at the same time. People love doubles matches, and there should be, I agree, there should be a lot more eyes on it for sure.
We talked about your favorite sport, or your not least favorite sports to cover. What about your roles? Because you do everything. You go you're on podcasts, you're a broadcaster, you're a host, you're producing, you're even producing a podcast. Am I right, on talksport?
So
called Coming Into the Cold?
Yeah, so I was assistant producer, which is that's just come to an end now, actually, and it's been a fantastic project to work on. It's created by Andrew Spence and Bernard Chembong, who their company's called Unedited. They had this vision. Andrew's vision was very much to create the story about the history of Black and mixed race footballers in the English game, starting from the 1800s right up to today. And what gave it that bit of a dynamic twist is that we just weren't looking at the game of football. We looked at history, culture, and society to show the shifting sands of attitude that has changed a fair bit, but is slowly starting to shift back. And it was a 6-parter, and I was the assistant producer. I did some of the interviews with some of the players. We did about 50 to 55 interviews.
Wow.
Narrated by Jess Crichton, who's from Sky Sports News, written by Drew Christie, wrote beautiful words. And we've had a lot of love for it, and I'm so happy for Bernard and Andrew, because they've smashed it out of the park, for sure. And it's available on all podcast platforms if you want to have a listen. It's brilliant, and some of the stories just absolutely make you laugh, and then some of the stories could actually bring you to tears, because it's that mixture of joy and pain, of pulling on your club shirt or pulling on your nation shirt, going out onto the football pitch and hearing the crowd either cheer for you or scream abuse at you. And if you were a player in the 70s and the 80s, you pretty much got it all day, every day.
And bad.
Whereas today, you get fewer incidences in the crowd, even though the figures have shown that they're on the rise again. It's more shifted onto social media, and we talk about that. We had Dr. Daniel Kivington from Leeds Beckett University, who talked about the rise of online hate through social media. And then we had Professor Paul Gilroy, who talked about the cultural, he's a cultural historian, who talks about that side of things. And it just brought that, as I said, that different dynamic to the documentary. It's been a real joy, and I'm really sad that it's come to an end. I feel like we should have series 2. So
especially with what's going on in the world now more than ever, it's amazing. And just I feel like a lot of people don't know how to. I've been talking about it often, like with a lot of my friends who are working in sport as well, and just like keyword is just to educate and just to, I don't know, find a way to tell stories, if anything, because sometimes people relate more to it to make them understand.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a good way to put it. And also, forgot to mention the music. We actually have a Spotify playlist because some of the music's just been Bernard's just been brilliant choosing the music for the documentary, which again just brings it so much to life. It is an educational piece, but it reaffirms the passion that each player had for the game. All they wanted to do and what they continue wanting to do is to play football.
Yeah.
That's it, and represent their country or represent their club. Most people know about the story of Arthur Wharton. He's regarded as the first professional black man to play football in England. But then I thought I knew everything because of my family history of what my uncle went through in the 70s and 80s. But I didn't know about Jack Leslie, for example. He was a prolific football striker for Plymouth Argyle, made tons of appearances in the late 20s, early 30s. His name actually appeared on a sheet of paper to be selected for England. In those days, it was decided by committees dotted around the country. And his name was on the sheet. His manager or coach told him that he'd be playing for his country. And then a couple of days later, his name was mysteriously removed and replaced by a man who's white, whereas Jack was black. And it wasn't officially confirmed that it was down to his skin color that his name disappeared off the sheet, but you can read between the lines that was probably the case.
Yeah, because why else last minute if his name was already
Exactly.
there and there was no plausible reason to take him off?
Exactly. And also when he retired, he worked in the boot room at West Ham for several years, but never really talked about his story.
Wow.
When Bobby Moore was there in the 60s,
Yeah.
and Harry Redknapp and other players as well, Clyde Best. So, just speaking to people and digging into the history, I learned so much from it. Even I was educated and I thought I knew everything about the history of black footballers coming from my family, but it turns out I didn't. So if anything, it's, as you say, it's very much about education, but it's also looking towards the future. I think we're pretty much there in terms of players on the pitch, and I'm sure Leon talked about this as well, and he knows this, but it's also about trying to encourage more people of colour, black, Asian and minority ethnic on the boards and in governance and coaching.
You started your own female and black owned company called Amberglass Presents, and you've been working a lot in diversity and in equality, and I don't know, I just want to shed light on that.
Oh, thank you. Remember at the beginning of our conversation, I said that I had that itch of just working for myself. This has been an idea that's been ticking away in my brain since forever, really, of just having my own business, having my own company, and having that, because as somebody who works on a freelance basis, on a self-employed basis, everything comes through my business. But I needed it to have a name. I wanted it to have its own entity and have its own branding. And I worked with a fabulous fellow Canadian by the name of Terry. She was wonderful. We'd had lots of chats and gossip over Zoom calls. And I sent her a very long brief of what I was looking for, because she created all the branding for me. And she really brought my vision to life. And for me, it's important that I house everything in this. And for me, it's female-led, i.e. me, and it's black-owned, me. And I'm making sure in all my branding that people can see that, because that's really important to me. And I wanted to build my own table. As Beyonce always says, if you can't get a seat at the table, build your own.
Yeah, love that.
And I think it's 100% spot on. And I'm really keen to talk about stories of the underrepresented within sport. That's why, coming in from the cold was such a great joy for me to work on as well. And I'll be looking for more projects of that nature. You talked about me having all these different hyphens, producer, reporter, broadcaster, and host. That's exactly what I wanted for myself. People would say to me, Nora, in the beginning, you can't concentrate on everything, Anne-Marie. You just need to focus on one thing and become a specialist. And I thought, well, yeah, but at the same time, what if you like doing all those things? What if you're good at all those things? Why can you not be a Jill of all trades? Why not? And I've had to push through on that. And I see myself as a multi-hyphenate. Look, there's nothing wrong with Jennifer Lopez going out there singing, dancing, acting, producing, directing. I'm just doing the same thing, but in sports media. And I'm not a big fan of her music, but I love her business mind. Jennifer Lopez and Beyonce and Rihanna and various other women who just built their own table. And that's exactly what I'm doing.
Do you have any stories, like any memorable moments so far that have really stuck with you? Anything significant or funny?
The first day of Wimbledon, I've got to say, was absolutely amazing. years of watching the coverage on the TV, never thinking in a million years that I would be there on the broadcast roof on that first day when they open the doors. And it is exactly like that, Nora, when they've got the rope and the security guards holding everybody back and then lead them in slowly. And then there's just they let the rope go and then everyone just runs for Henman Hill. It was surreal. We were myself and Danny, the other presenter, we were broadcasting live at that time on the roof, and the noise that was coming through was just absolutely amazing. Everyone was really buzzing, really exciting. It was a beautiful day, and I just looked around and I had to pinch myself hard several times because I was thinking, I'm live across all the social channels. I'm talking about one of my loves, which is tennis. I'm on the broadcast roof. I'm in Southwest 19. And there's people coming through the door really excited to see the first day's play. Even now when I'm talking to you about it brings a smile to my face because I couldn't believe it. It was a completely surreal moment. Another one I would say was being in the Wembley Tunnel interviewing Phil Neville live for talksport after England playing Germany.
I looked that up. That's crazy. Yeah. That's amazing.
Great. Again, I'm in the Wembley Tunnel talking to the England national manager. Unfortunately, the result didn't go our way, and I'm live on the radio talking to him, just asking various questions about what happened in the match. And again, just so surreal, from somebody who works on the railway to now somebody interviewing Phil Neville live on the radio. The mind boggles. It still boggles me to this day.
How much work goes in the prep?
A lot. I'd say if I'm at a football match the day before, I'll probably spend all day listening to podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts anyway, but I make sure that I listen to podcasts again just to get that intel, look at the stats, do a bit of digging on websites, social media. I love it when I talk to players sometimes. I've looked on their social media and I'll pick something really obscure from their social media page and I'll ask them about it. And they'll go, you've done your prep. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah,
of course.
Damn straight.
Yeah, damn straight I have. Of course.
I'm a badass, don't you know?
Oh dear. Yeah, dude, prep is everything to me.
Yeah.
It is, and I really enjoy the process. Actually, I really enjoy prepping because then I feel confident that I have the right knowledge and the facts and so on and so forth. And I guess that's from my days of working as a communications manager, because you had to do a lot of preparation. You have to do a lot of research. And again, those skills that I learned there have come in so handy for today.
Nice. So in general, would you have any advice to any aspiring broadcasters or hosts or anything in the sports media world?
I'd say definitely networking, 100%. And I know it's really difficult now with the coronavirus pandemic. I've been trying to think of ways of trying to help with that, because I know what it's like when you have absolutely no contacts whatsoever. It's incredibly hard. And it's on my to-do list of trying to sort out something to help people that are coming through, for sure. But whatever happens, you've got to build a network, because without it, it's going to be a really, really big struggle. Don't forget, people are watching all the time. If you're putting out regular content, specifically on social media, people do watch and they do pay attention. They just may not necessarily tell you that. So do put out your own stuff. Make sure that you're commenting on a football match. And when I say commenting, if you want to be a match commentator, practice that. If you're somebody who wants to get into the business of football, this whole talk about Project Big Pitch has been a big news story over here. I don't know if you've heard of it over in Canada, but it's been a big news story. If you're interested in the sports news, you should comment about it on your social media, because it gives you credibility. I've got lots of bits of advice. My third bit of advice.
We're here for
it. I still believe, though I do struggle with it sometimes, that this business is about meritocracy, that the best person will get the job. And yes, it should always be the best person, and the best person with the best talent, the best experience, the best knowledge, and so on and so forth. Sometimes it's not like that, but just remember your eyes is on the prize, regardless of all the noise that may be going on around you. As long as you're looking forward and you're not looking to the side, worrying about competition, even though I don't really like that word. It is a competitive market, but keep your eye on the prize. That's the main thing. Keep your eyes looking forward.
There you have it, folks. She's a book of inspiration. She's a badass. Anne-Marie Batson, thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure
Nora.
to chat with you.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll do another one with Mia as well in the future.
I'd love that. That'd be great.
Where can they find you on your socials?
I'm on all of it. Right. So Twitter and LinkedIn, I'm just at Anne-Marie Batson. I have a website, AnneMarieBatson.com. I'm also on LinkedIn as Anne-Marie Batson as well. All very simple for me. So
lovely. And I'll put everything down in the description below. And yeah, thank you everyone for listening, and look forward to the next one.